Despite the fact that many Slavs share a common history, faith, culture, and similar languages, Slavic nations and countries often harbor hostility towards each other and exhibit animosity towards other Slavic peoples. There were even ideas of uniting all Slavs at some point, and in this video we'll discuss why Slavs do not like each other. To begin with, let's analyze the main conflicts between Slavic nations, the disagreements that existed in the past, and those that still persist. One of the most prominent conflicts among Slavs is the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, which has escalated into a war at this stage. Relations between these states have been complex for centuries, with Ukrainian lands being part of Russia for a long time. During this period, there were frequent uprisings in Ukraine against Russia, often led by Cossacks. The most well-known rebellion was that of Mazepa, during which he switched sides from the Russo-Swedish War to join Sweden. This is why in 1775 Catherine II decided to eliminate the Zaporozhian Sich as the main threat to Russian government in the territory of Ukraine. During the time of the Russian Revolution, Ukraine briefly gained independence, forming the Ukrainian People's Republic, which soon fell under the vassalage of the Germans. After the end of World War I, Ukraine became part of the Soviet Union, once again becoming dependent on Russia. During World War II, collaborationist and insurgent groups emerged in Ukraine, fighting for Ukraine's separation from Russia. With the dissolution of the Soviet Union, Ukraine became independent, and relations with Russia constantly fluctuated between friendly and hostile. The year of 2014 marked a turning point in relations between the two countries. After the annexation of Crimea and the start of the war in Donbass, relations sharply deteriorated. On my channel there are videos about conflicts between Ukraine and Russia, as well as a separate video on how Russia and Ukraine turned into enemies. One of the most prominent conflicts among Slavs is the conflict between Russia and Poland. Historically, these countries stood against each other for centuries, and today they find themselves in complex and hostile relations. Poland has been a traditional opponent of Russia since medieval times, when the two countries started competing for lands in Eastern Europe. There have been at least 12 Russo-Polish wars throughout history, and considering political clashes and other confrontations, the number is much higher. Despite the dissolution of the Polish state, known as the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in the late 18th century, when a significant part of its lands became part of Russia, the Poles maintained a hostile attitude toward Russia and Russians, and their assimilation was unsuccessful. Poles initiated several major uprisings in the Russian Empire and attempted to create their own state, but these efforts were not successful. The rebirth of Poland occurred after World War I, resisted by Russia amidst its own civil war at the time. Even with the creation of the new state, Poland's attitude towards Russia did not change and remained hostile. In the period of 1921 and 1939, the Soviet Union, representing Russia, even engaged in two wars with Poland. For a brief period, Poland became a friendly state towards Russia and joined the Warsaw Pact. This lasted from 1945 to 1989, and during this time, relations between Russia and Poland were somewhat vassal-like. With the fall of the socialist bloc, Poland established a democratic government, which once again adopted an anti-Russian stance, a sentiment that continues to be observed today. As we can see, Poland and Russia have been almost constant adversaries throughout history, with relative peace occurring only when Polish lands were under Russian control. Moving to the Balkans, relations between Southern Slavs also faced challenges and remain in a complex situation. While the nations were under the influence of other countries, especially the Ottoman Empire, their relations were generally friendly, often jointly resisting colonization and fighting for independence. However, with the advent of independence, relations began to worsen, starting with the relationship between Croatia and Serbia, which remains extremely chilly to this day. Relations between Serbs and Croats never fully materialized after the establishment of Yugoslavia after World War I, despite the approval of the concept of creating a united state by the all Southern Slavs. Croatians and Serbs, as the most populous nations in the kingdom, began to struggle for leadership. With the onset of World War II, a puppet Croatian state with the ultra-right Ustaše at the helm was established on parts of Yugoslav territory, essentially committing genocide against Serbs. After the war, Serbs were subjected to Tito's socialist dictatorship, which temporarily held the nations in check. However, with the Tito's death, the decline of the Yugoslav state began, leading to a bloody war among Yugoslav nations. Serbs started fighting each other, expelling each other from lands, and committing atrocities. This significantly affected relations between Serbs and Croatia, which remained hostile even after 30 years. In this context, it's worth mentioning the Bosniaks, who were also actively involved in the Yugoslav Wars, fighting both with Croats and Serbs. In addition to regular military actions, this was accompanied by persecution and killings of civilians. The largest massacre occurred in Srebrenica in 1995, when about 8,000 Bosniaks were killed by the Serbian army. It's evident that these events have left a mark on the relationships between the countries, and the relations between many Yugoslav republics remain tense to this day. Even the state of Bosnia and Herzegovina, where Serbs, Croats, and Bosniaks reside, is full of contradictions and could potentially erupt at any moment. Between Macedonia and Bulgaria, there are also some disagreements on the national question, despite the historical absence of conflicts between the two countries. After gaining independence, Bulgaria essentially laid claim to Macedonian territories, asserting that the Macedonian language is a dialect of Bulgarian, and that Macedonians are essentially Bulgarians, separated from their ethnicity during the existence of Yugoslavia. Macedonians, however, consider themselves a distinct ethnic group. There was also pressure on Macedonia regarding the country's name. Like Greece, Bulgaria demanded renaming the country to North Macedonia, which indeed happened in 2019. A similar attitude exists in Serbia towards Montenegro. Many Serbs, including prominent politicians, consider them to be the same nation speaking the same language. Montenegrins defended their right to identity, although they maintain relatively warm relations with Serbia. Montenegro essentially became the last country to secede from Yugoslavia. The division among Slavs today can be categorized in two groups: those integrating into Western organizations, namely the European Union and NATO, and those who do not. Most Slavic countries are now either in the EU or NATO, or are in the process of integration. NATO members include Poland, the Czech Republic, Bulgaria, Slovakia, Croatia, Macedonia, Slovenia, and Montenegro. The European Union includes the same countries, except for Macedonia and Montenegro. Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as Ukraine, are also in the process of integration into Western organizations. This leaves three countries outside Western blocs: Russia, Belarus, and Serbia. While Russia and Belarus are unlikely to integrate in the European Union and NATO in the near future and may even move further away, the question of Serbia remains in a suspended state. On one hand, surrounded by European countries, Serbia will eventually be compelled to integrate into the European space. On the other hand, Serbia holds a somewhat negative view of its neighbors, especially regarding the recognition of Kosovo by Europe and NATO, which bombed its cities not long ago. In conclusion, it can be said that throughout history, Slavic nations have accumulated numerous conflicts and misunderstandings, some very recent and others still ongoing today.